Well, good morning, everybody. It's exciting to be here, and as we kind of just you put a wrap on 2013, I think it's always good to just take a few moments to think back on the year that was. Maybe many of you have already, as you guys have been kind of counting down the last few days of 2013. But today we're going to take a little look back at 2013 and also a look ahead at 2014. And so a few weeks ago, we went into the lobby. Gaston was filming a few people, and we asked them, what are you thankful for? What are some things you're thankful for? And so we have a video that we wanted to show with just a few of you guys sharing some of those answers. So let's take a look at that.
One thing I'm thankful for this year is just the love and support of my family and my friends.
I'm thankful for faith, family, friends, and rubber slippers at work.
South Bay Community Church blessed me with all these great people and a new family to me, new family members, and it's just wonderful.
I'm thankful for the people.
God, of course. God is good. God has blessed us this year with so many things with my family and with church.
I am thankful for education and being able to go to college.
I'm thankful for my mom.
I'm thankful for Auntie Sally.
I'm thankful for James.
I'm thankful for my kids and for all the help that people at our church gives us.
One thing I'm thankful for that I could just think about because we just finished our praise night is being back and worshiping.
A whole lot thankful for this church, beautiful church, great people. Thankful for this church.
Well, thank you to you guys for sharing a few answers. We're going to have a few more a little later in service with another video. But as we look back at the year, I think especially for our church, we can look back on it as a year of change. It really was a year of change here at SBCC as we moved into our new home. And maybe for many of you guys can relate that your year was full of change. Maybe many things that you didn't expect coming into the year. As you guys look back. And, I can definitely say for some of you guys, maybe some of those changes were very positive. Maybe there are things that you'll look back at 2013 and be like, man, this was a blessed year because God brought a whole bunch of surprises your way. And maybe some of those things were new relationships. Maybe there were new relationships that you entered into this year that you were so blessed by. Maybe for some of you it was a new member of your family. Maybe you guys had a kid for the first time or another addition to your family, so your family grew, and that'll always be something you think back on as you look back at this year. Maybe for some of you it was a new job, a new occupation, a new challenge for you at your workplace. And for some of you it may have been new friends. You guys made some new friendships this year, maybe here at the church or maybe wherever it is you guys hang out. You guys made some strong friendships that you know are going to last this year and beyond. Maybe even for some of you guys, I know some of you guys moved into a new home this year. You guys finally had a chance to buy a house or to move into someplace new. And so you guys really will look back up the year fondly with that memory. And for maybe even some of you, I know if you got married this year. So 2013 will be the year that you got married. It will always hold a special place in your heart as you guys tied the knot with your significant other. Well, as great as some of those things were, also too, I know there's another side. And that is the side that maybe 2013 will be remembered as a year that wasn't so great for some of you. Maybe there were things that happened in your life that really were a struggle and things that you maybe never saw coming, but that's what the year held for you guys. And, I can look back on the year and I'll share a little more later. And in 2013, it wasn't all upsides. It wasn't all celebration. There were definitely some things that happened this year that were tough to deal with. And maybe some of you guys, it was maybe for your health. I know that for many people, they just had health problems this year. Your health broke down and you faced challenges there. Maybe it was the health of a loved one that you had to sit by and watch them as they struggled with their health. Maybe for some of you guys, we talked about, relationships that started, but maybe it was a year where relationships ended. Maybe relationships that were very near and dear to you broke apart or started to show just cracks in it and strain in it, and you'll remember the year for that. Maybe loved ones moved away. If you guys had kids, maybe your kids went off to college this year, or maybe they got married and they moved away, and you said goodbye to some loved ones as they're now in different cities or different places. And maybe even for some of you guys lost a loved one who passed away. Maybe someone that you cared about, you love, it was part of your family, lost their lives this year. And that is something that will really just put a strong indention on what 2013 was, is that it was the year that you lost someone that you really cared about. I think no matter how you look at your year, I think the one thing that we can agree about is that it was a year of change. It really was. And maybe when you guys started 2013, maybe when you were at this place last year, you never could have imagined the things that were going to come your way. And just to share with you guys, I'm pretty sure as you guys get ready for 2014, the same thing is going to be happening. Some things are going to come your way. Some changes are going to come your way that are going to come out of nowhere. And some are going to be good and some are going to be bad. But I think what I want to look at this morning is, how does God want us to handle this change? As this change comes for all of us, how does he want us to approach it? How does he want us to deal with that? And so we're going to look a little bit at that this morning. But before we do, let me open us up in a word of prayer. Father, we're thankful to be here, and as this is actually the final service in 2013 here at SBCC, Lord, I think it's always a perfect time just to look back and reflect. I think you call us, Lord, to not just keep moving forward, but to sit back and reflect on the things that you've done, that we could look back on what you've done and why you've done it, Lord. I ask, Father, for each of us, we can just kind of sit back and look at our years, whether it's for us individually or for our families, or even look at it in the context of this church, and really learn some important lessons, Father. We know change is coming as we head into 2014, and some of it may be change that we expect, it may be change that we embrace, and I know for some of us it might be change that is very difficult, and change that we don't want to have anything to do with. But Father, show us how we are to approach that change, and how we are to handle it in you. We pray these things in your name, Father. Amen. Well, let me ask you guys a quick question, just by a raise of hands. How many of you guys like change? How many people like change here? A couple. Okay, we got a few here. On the flip side, by raise of hands again, how many of you guys dislike change? Much more. Okay, that's just the same thing last night. Most people, and I myself included, I'm not a big proponent of change. I'm not a big fan of change. I know it's going to happen, but I'm not one that embraces it when it does come my way. And one way I know that our church is a church that doesn't change much is because I can tell by where you sit. Many of you guys have your seats or your areas that you guys like to sit in, and I know exactly where to find you because I can look in that area in the worship center and find you guys there. I know there's the front row people. I know Crystal usually sits towards the front row. I know Trisha's usually in the front row here. Last night, Gail Northrup, Irene Tamaki. I know certain people where they're going to sit. I know Zig, where to find him. He's usually back there by the back door, like hugging people and dancing and singing as people come in. But I can kind of tell, for most of you, where you guys are going to sit. And there's nothing wrong with that. You guys kind of have your favorite seats. Some of you like to sit at the end of the aisle, so you can kind of make a quick escape after service or use the restroom. But, I think it's just a sign that, people like familiarity. They like things and they like to know what to expect. And if I asked you guys to move out of your seat, you might not be so willing to do so. But that's okay. That's okay. I think there are many reasons I think people dislike change. And I wanted to share with you, I was kind of just looking online, what are some of the most common reasons people don't like change. And I wanted to just share a few of them with you here. Maybe you guys can relate to a few of these reasons. One of them is just loss of control. I think for many, actually being a creature of habit, that's the first one, is being a creature of habit. I think for many of us, we like what we're used to. We do things a certain way. Maybe we drive somewhere a certain way, and that's the way that we get there. Maybe we eat certain foods at certain times of the day because that's our habit, and that's what we like to do, and that's what we're used to. There's comfort in that. And I very much am a creature of habit. I like to do things in a repetitive fashion, even into what I eat. And sharing with you guys real quick, I was hanging out at a small group the other week, and we had a gift exchange. And I believe Ashley Morris got my name, and so she gave me my gift, and I opened it up, and it was 3 bags of pita chips and a case of Diet Mountain Dew. And you may think, wow, that's a horrible gift. Why did she give you that? But Ashley knew me because those are things that I eat every day. Every day I eat pita chips, and every day I drink a Diet Mountain Dew without fail. So I know I killed about 365 cans of that stuff over this past year, and probably more because there's some days I drank 2. But it's just something that I eat and I look forward to, and it's how I relax. And so, I can totally understand that thinking of being a creature of habit. For some of us, it's a loss of control. We don't like and we resist change because we like to feel like we are the ones in control, steering the car. And when change comes, all of a sudden we don't have that feeling anymore, because it's under the control of someone else or other circumstances. And so for some of us, we struggle with that. For some of us, it's being closed-minded. There's just, change comes and we just, nope, it's not going to happen. I'm just closed-minded. I'm not going to do that unless it's forced upon me. And we just have a very closed mind to change. And, I like to think of myself as an open-minded guy, but there are some things that I'm pretty closed-minded about. And a lot of that has to do with like what I wear, how I dress myself. Maybe some of you guys are like, there's certain things, you know what, I'm just not going to wear, and I don't care who's wearing it, it's not going to happen. And one of those things for me is a V-neck t-shirt. I just, not, if you guys are wearing it, it's fine. They're fine shirts. For many people, it looks very fashionable. And I've had girls tell me, hey, you should wear a V-neck. And I tried it on at the store, and it's just, I just don't like that little dip down, and I just, I couldn't do it. I can't rock a V-neck like Pastor Joey did up here, and he'd wear those deep V's, that would go pretty far down. But that's just one thing that, I'm very closed-minded about. And maybe for some of you, there's certain things you guys are closed-minded about as well. A few more is just, oftentimes what we believe, what is new may not necessarily be better than what we already have. So the idea of changing into something that's different, why would we do that when what we have is perfectly good? What I have works, and so why is there a need to change? And that's why some people you see still have flip phones as opposed to smartphones. It's why some people still love their VCRs instead of having a DVD player or a Blu-ray player. And for maybe many of us, we have that certain piece of clothing that is so raggedy, but it's so comfortable. And we don't want to get rid of it no matter how much our family hates it, whether it's our beat-up pair of shoes or our comfortable PJs, even though we have something perfectly good to replace it with, why get rid of it? Because what we have works. And finally, and I think this is one that we can all relate to, is this: we resist change because of fear of the unknown. And if you break it down, man, sometimes change is scary. It's scary because we don't know what to expect. We don't know what it's going to look like. And all of a sudden, things are out of our hands. And so there's this sense of fear that comes with change. No one likes to have that feeling of uncertainty. Well, for all these reasons and more, we tend to be people who resist change. And we like to control the change in our lives, is what I found out, is that, we can say, hey, you know what, I'm open, God, change things in my life, but you know what, God, there's a certain set of stipulations I'm going to put down for this change. You can change me, you can maybe move my life around a little bit, but it's got to fall within these parameters. And so we like to try to control the change. We try to manipulate it. We try to tell God when we want it and how we want it and what it's going to look like. And you guys have a yellow sheet right here in your Baywatch. You guys can follow along with it with some of the scriptures and the points. And that's my first point for you today regarding change, is that change should be managed, but not manipulated. Change should be managed, but not manipulated. There's change God wants to bring in our lives, and he wants to bring it into our lives in a certain fashion, in a certain way, according to his plan, because he knows that's going to work out best for us. He has specific reasons for what he's moving us into and how it's going to look and at what time period it's going to take place. But for us, just as people, because we're so resistant to the change, we tell God that, but then we try to manipulate it. We try to change it. We try to make it look like what we want it to look like. And there's a verse I want to share with you guys. This is from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, and this is actually said by Solomon. Solomon, one of the wisest men in the whole Bible. When God gave him a gift and said, Solomon, I'll give you whatever you want, Solomon asked for godly wisdom. And so when Solomon writes, he comes from a place of just having a wise outlook on all the things in life. And this is what he says, and especially I want you to pay attention to verse 13. He says this: accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what he has made crooked? Enjoy prosperity while you can, but when hard times strike, realize that both come from God. Remember that nothing is certain in this life. And I think what I want to pull your guys' attention to is at verse 13, accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what he has made crooked? And I think what I pull from that is, even though it's our nature to want to adjust things, who of us is worthy to adjust the plan that God has for us? Who of us has the foresight and the forethought to adjust what God is trying to do in our lives? And yet that's exactly what we try to do when we try to manipulate the changes that God brings into our lives. We try to straighten what he has made crooked. We think that we know better just because it's easier for us, and we don't. We really don't. And there's a reason that I can actually show you practically why this happens and how it plays out in our lives. And it's this, is as we head into the new year, we all have our resolutions, right? And for many of us, maybe it's not a resolution, but we kind of tell ourselves, hey, this is the year I'm going to get healthy. You know what, like Pastor Gary mentioned last week, we eat badly, hey, tomorrow I'm going to start. Well, maybe at the beginning of the year, that tomorrow is today. And so that's why as people flood into the gyms at the beginning of the year, because they're going to start working out, right? This is the year they get healthy, they get fit. We're going to start eating better because the holidays are over and all those desserts and all that food we ate is past us. So now we're going to get healthy. Now, I think the common sense way to lose weight, as the majority of us would agree upon, and it may look a little different for each person, is the two easiest ways to lose weight is one, to exercise, right? Just to get on some kind of exercise plan, no matter what that looks like. And two is to eat healthier. I think, those would probably be the two common sense approaches to bring about change in our body, to change our appearance. But for some of us, we want to take a different path. We know that that's a reality, and we know that that is a practical way to lose weight. But we want to change. We want to manipulate it. We want it to look a little different. We want it to be easier. We want it to be easier to lose weight. And so that's why you see all these fad diets that come up, things that sound ridiculous, but people swear by them because maybe it means they don't have to work out. Maybe it means that they can maybe eat some of the foods that they want to eat. And so I looked up some of the fad diets. What were the popular fad diets in 2013? And some of them, I'd never heard of these before, but apparently there are diets that people are trying, and they're pretty ridiculous. And I just wanted to share a couple of them with you today. And one of them is called the cotton ball diet. The cotton ball diet. This thing it's really weird, and it's kind of gross, actually. And what these people do is they take a cotton ball and they dip it in juice. They dip it in, maybe orange juice, grape juice, or a smoothie, and then they eat it. They eat the cotton ball and they swallow it down. And the thought behind that is that, there's, I guess, maybe some minimal nutrients from the juice, but when it hits their stomach, it expands, right? The cotton ball expands, and so it gives them a full feeling, and it prevents them from, I guess, wanting to eat more food. And as I was looking at the website, you think it sounds crazy, but the approval rating on this thing was like 67%, which is a pretty good approval rating for a diet. And so that's what people do to try to lose weight instead of the normal way of exercising. And I guess they're watching what they eat to a certain way. But I was going to try to demonstrate this for you this morning of what this cotton ball diet may look like. So I got some cotton here. I tried this last night and I almost died. I think I almost choked to death. But I'm going to give it one more shot this morning. So they take a cotton ball, right? And they grab their juice. I'm going to try to do this a little differently. And so maybe they'll pour a cup of juice, their smoothie, they got it going. And then they take the cotton ball. Oh, man. So if I choke, will someone come up and give me the Heimlich or something? All right, promise me. I don't want to die on stage in the final service of 2013. But okay, so they dip it right in, like that. Oh, man. And then they swallow it, man. And that's what they do. And these girls on the video were doing like 5 or 6 in a row. And that's how they got full, and that's how they chose to lose weight. Boy, that was way better than last night. Okay, good call. I was debating whether to do that again, but that's what they do to lose weight, right? That's one diet that is popular. Oh, man, sorry, hold on. Let me down some water with that. Another one is just as ridiculous. Is called the air diet. The air diet. And one second, guys. I'm a little scared to go to the bathroom after eating all this cotton. It's going to be interesting. All right. The last one is the air diet. And this was actually made popular by Madonna in some ads that she was pictured in. And what they do with this is that they'll take the food and they'll smell it. And they'll put it near their mouth. And they might even put the food in their mouth, but they don't eat it. And the thought behind it is that you get the smell, the sensation of smelling it, of having it near your mouth, but that helps you in a way to bring nutrients into your body. And these people are called breatharians. It's a very fancy name, breatharians. I'm a breatharian. But that's what they do. So it would just be like, if I grab this cupcake and, it looked really good, but it smells so good, like sugar, and I'm going to put it in my mouth, and I'm full now. Man, that was delicious. That was so good. I'm so happy with that. But that's what people do. And I think we can all agree that these are stupid. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? The best way to bring about change in your body would be to exercise and to diet. But people want to find the easy way out. They want to manipulate the change in their body, and they want to do it on their own terms, and they want to do it in a fashion that's easier instead of putting the hard work in. And just relating it back is that, we can manipulate the change God intends for us, but when we try to do that, it becomes distorted. It begins to come forth in a way that God never intended it to be. That's why he had his plan, and yet we change it by trying to get it on our own terms. Just like we take these diets and we try to distort the change. And if you eat cotton all the time, I'm pretty sure it's not good for you. What the doctors were saying, that it forms blockages because that cotton doesn't break down in your system. And you may be losing weight, but in the long run, it's going to hurt your body because it's going to cause complications. And I'm sorry, you can smell that cupcake for all you're worth, but you're not getting any nutrients out of it. You're not going to get anything out of that food if you don't actually eat it. But that's what people choose to do. And I think in a way, that's what we do with God when we try to distort the change he intends for us. And just the final thing with that point is I wanted to relate it back to a story in the Bible. I think that really follows this principle very well, and that is through the story of Abraham and Sarah. Maybe many of you have read that in the book of Genesis, and just to give you guys a quick, just reminder on what happened there. Abraham, God had promised Abraham that he was to be the father of the Jewish nation, and that his descendants would be more numerous than the stars in the sky. That's the plan that he had for Abraham. But the big problem is that Abraham was older and his wife Sarah was older as well. So as God promised that he would bring them a child to start all these descendants, Sarah was like 90 years of age, which is well beyond the years of bearing a child. But God promised that he would deliver this child to them. He just didn't tell them when and how that would look. And Abraham and Sarah, they were on board with that promise. But Sarah took matters into her own hands to manipulate the change. She said, you know what, I can't have a child, I'm too old. So you know what, I came up with my own plan. And her plan was that her maidservant, Hagar, that she was going to ask Hagar to sleep with her husband, Abraham, and that Hagar was going to be the one to have the child. So in a way, she was taking what God planned and she was doing it on her own terms. And so she ran this idea by Abraham, and they decided to go forth with this plan. And it worked up to a certain point. Hagar became pregnant, and she had her son Ishmael. But Ishmael wasn't the child that God wanted to use. And when Ishmael was born, it caused a lot of division in the family between Abraham, between Sarah, between Hagar. And it began to divide their family in a way that God never intended, because this wasn't the plan that God had for them. It distorted God's plan. And it wasn't until God actually provided a natural childbirth for Sarah that she had Isaac. And Isaac was the one that God had intended all along that was going to help bring this family along. That was going to be the one that God was going to use to bring descendant after descendant after descendant to build the Jewish nation. And from there, it was Isaac, not Ishmael, that God used to bring eventually the lineage that led to King David. And then from King David, many, many, many years later, to Jesus Christ, to the birth of our Savior. That was the plan God had all along. But if it was up to Sarah, even though she believed the promise, even though she knew the change was coming, that would have never happened because she was trying to bring about the change on her terms. And because she was doing that, it was destined for failure. It was destined for ruin. But thankfully, she was able to realize her mistake, and her and Abraham were able to bring this child into the world just like God intended through Jacob. It's just like Solomon said, who of us is to straighten out what God has made crooked? We aren't to manipulate that change. We are to manage the change as God brings it about in our lives. That's my first point for you this morning. Our second one is to be grateful rather than to grumble. To be grateful for the change God brings rather than grumbling about it. I think it's very much within human nature is that we tend to fixate on the things that are wrong in our lives. So for instance, many things may be happening that are good, that we are to be thankful for, great things that are going on in our lives. But if there's that one or two things that just aren't right, that's where all our focus goes. That's where all our attention goes. It's much like a paper cut, right? We get these little paper cuts, and it's such a small little thing. It seems like such a small little nuisance, but that thing hurts. And we begin to look at it, and it begins to throb. And even though 99.9% of the rest of our body is fine, we look at that one little paper cut, and we're like, oh man, you know what? This stinks, but I wish it would go away. And on a much bigger scale in our lives, I think God brings change sometimes that we're uncomfortable with, and that's what we fixate on. Is, man, God, this change is so uncomfortable. Why are you doing this? Why is this happening? And we forget about everything else that God has blessed us with that is going on. Just to relate this to our church, our church, I think, has gone through this, where we've entered a period over these last 3 years where we very much could have grumbled for the circumstances that God brought our way, even amidst all the blessings that we had. And, I just wanted to give you guys, as we kind of head into the year, we look at, all the things that God is doing. But before we kind of talk about our history and our building and where we went, I think there's a certain benefits, I think, to thinking and being thankful for what God's doing instead of grumbling. And, I've seen it here at our church and many of the people here, but there actually are certain benefits, even just physically, to having a grateful attitude towards God. And one of those things is, I came up with some research of, what that looks like. And I just wanted to share it with you. I wanted to read it to you real quick on what studies have shown from people who practice being thankful and what that looks like in their lives. And so it says this: studies have shown that people who regularly practice feeling thankful have a leg up when it comes to their health. Robert Emnons, a psychology professor at the University of California at Davis, has been a leading researcher in this growing field termed positive psychology. His research has found that those who adopt an attitude of gratitude as a permanent state of mind experience many health benefits. Emnon's findings, along with those from other researchers such as Lisa Aspinwall, a psychology professor at the University of Utah, suggest that grateful people may be more likely to, and this is kind of the interesting part, grateful people may be more likely to take better care of themselves physically and mentally, they get more regular exercise, they eat a healthier diet, they have improved mental alertness, they just cope better with the stress and daily challenges that life brings their way, they feel happier and they're more optimistic. They have a stronger immune system, and they maintain a brighter view of the future. This is what comes from people who are grateful instead of complaining, and people who grumble, that are thankful for the things in their lives. That there's people with that upbeat attitude who it genuinely goes to their soul, that, they live a better quality of life. And because I think that's what God designed us to be. He designed us to be grateful people that worship, people that are thankful for what they have, instead of people who complain or grumble about the changes that God brings into their lives. And, relating it back here to our church, our church very much could have went through a period where we complained and we grumbled. And this was a big year for us because obviously we moved into our home. After a long 3-year plus wait, we finally got into our home. And I just wanted to share a little bit of what that looked like. Many of you guys went through it with us step by step in this process. But, 3 years ago, we were at our home on 190th, just a little further up the street. That was our building there, 1459 West 190th Street. And it was a great home that we were blessed with. But, we lost our lease. And when we lost our lease, we had to get out of there. We had to move. And we didn't have a place to move into right away. So we pretty much were nomads. We wandered around the South Bay at many, many different locations. Whether it was hotels, whether it was parks, whether it was community centers, whether it was even one time having to have service at our offices on Amapola Avenue because there was a mix-up in scheduling at the Holiday Inn, so we jammed everybody in that cramped little quarters. That's where we met. And struggles came along with that. As we left our home there on 190th, our attendance dropped. It did. We began to lose people. And we knew that would happen. We just didn't know how many, because people wanted to be at a church that was more established, that had a home. They didn't want to be trying to figure out each week where we were going to be and what services were going to look like. And so we began to experience a loss of attendance. And from there, we began to experience a loss of finances. And it was a tough struggle for us trying to figure that out and what that was going to look like. We finally were able to get a potential deal to move into this facility, but there was all kinds of challenges with that. Just trying to get permits and work out what that was going to look like financially, what we were going to commit to. And then that deal fell through. There was a point where, the conditions just weren't something that, our church and our church leadership felt comfortable in pursuing. And so that deal fell apart. And we began to wonder again, God, is this just who South Bay Community Church is going to be? Is it going to be that we're going to meet in hotels and other people's buildings for the foreseeable future? But God opened up the door, and he brought a new deal onto the table that had much more favorable conditions for us as far as lease and what we were going to be able to have and build here. And we were super excited for that. I remember how excited we were that the deal was back on. So what we tried to do to be faithful on our part is to raise finances. We had our capital funds campaign, Aspire, to raise funds because we knew to move in here, we were going to have to make improvements. We were going to have to build the worship centers. We were going to have to build the lobby. We were going to have to build kids' crew. But there was another point where we could have grumbled because as generous as our church was, in just providing funds, we didn't meet our fundraising goals. And we began to wonder, man, are we going to be able to just build the necessities of what we need to get into this building? And it was another struggle that we went through. But God provided just enough money to build the things that we needed to purchase the equipment that we needed. And finally, we got to 2013, and we were thinking, we weren't sure when we were going to move in, and there was all these starts and stops on when we were going to be here. At first, it was, hey, we're going to be there by Christmas time of 2012, and then it was, hey, we're going to be in there right at the beginning of 2013. And then for sure, we were going to be in there by Easter, but we weren't. We were at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. Until finally we said, okay, our owner was telling us, hey, we'll be in there in June, and so we set our grand opening date at June 1st. And even that was a challenge because up to a week before, we didn't have our permit to get into the building. And we were praying, God, please provide us an opportunity to get in here because this is what we've been telling people and this is what we've planned. And we're at a time where we really need to move because we don't have our spaces anymore at the temporary sites. And so all these things happen. I think that very much we could have grumbled about. And you know what? We did grumble sometimes. We did complain. I know sometimes it was a struggle for some of us. But I think on the whole, we began to realize and be thankful for the things God was doing instead. And what I mean by that is, by being at those different sites for 3 years, I believe we reached people that we would have normally never reached if we would have stayed at our location back there on 190th or if we would have moved into this building. We began to meet people at hotels, at parks that became a part of our church family, minister to people in those ways, and meet a new audience that we never would have met before. There are people that joined our church that never remember that building there at 1459 West 190th Street. They joined us on this journey at different hotels at the Holiday Inn or different places, different churches that we were meeting at. We saw the faithfulness of God to provide just the right amount of finances. He knew what we were shooting for, but he decided to give us just enough to meet the need, just enough so that we could take care of the necessities. He provided through you, our church family. The lessons of faith and dependence he taught us, even the power of prayer, because, as I was sharing about how we were praying to get that permit so that we could have the grand opening on the 1st, we decided, as many of you guys took part in a 24-hour prayer vigil. And we said, all right, we don't know if this is going to happen, but the only thing we can do at this point is just to pray. And so we're going to pray for 24 hours if God provides this permit to move into this place. And it was funny. It was right at the 22nd hour of that prayer vigil that we got the call from the owner in the city to Carlton letting us know, hey, you guys got the permit. You're going to be able to have the grand opening on the 1st. And we saw the power of God moving through prayer, that we had to come to that point. That's where God wanted to take us to bring about this change, to show us that he's a faithful God if we bring things before him. And so all these things we would have never learned. And we have been so blessed and we're so thankful to be here in our new home. Even in these past 6-7 months that we've been here, we have seen God moving in just crazy ways. I think that maybe even for us, we didn't foresee when we moved in here. And just a few of those things I wanted to share with you guys is, even back in July, we had our Doing Church as a Team conference here. The first, a big scale conference that we ever held here as a team from New Hope, Hawaii came here just for an awesome weekend of just teaching and of celebration and worship of God. And, the things that came through that is, we began to see how New Hope, how they organize their services. And a lot of things that we learn are things that we're instituting here at our church now. Things that performing arts groups that we want to build and how they structure their services. And we learned so much from them. And those are things you're going to see incorporated into our church as we go month by month into the new year. We had our first baptism service here that maybe some of you in this room were baptized in this service. Over 40 people baptized that day. We were able to hold that service out in the back, that celebration. It was an awesome, awesome time, being able to do that instead of, heading down to Seaside Lagoon and holding our baptism services over there. And then finally, even just recognizing what God was doing, even last week, as we had our first Christmas here, we had our Christmas program. We had over 1,000 people come through the doors in those two services. And over 15 people grab new life packets, which are packets people grab when they're committing their life to Christ. 15 people grabbed those packets that weekend. And we can be thankful for what God was doing through those services. It would have been very easy, I think, along this way to complain, and maybe some of us do that. And I know I do that with the changes in my life. I complain about them. But there's so much to be thankful for. If we don't just fixate on the things that are uncomfortable, we focus on what there is to be thankful for. And I just wanted to share one more verse with you here about what the heart of thanks looks like. And this is from Colossians chapter 3, verse 15. And it says this, it says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. It's that feeling, you can feel it, just thanking God for what he's providing. You know, we wanted to show one more video of people who are giving thanks from our church. And some of these people in this video are giving thanks for the good things that's happened in their lives in 2013. And some of the people are giving thanks maybe for some difficult things that have happened over this past year. And so let's take a look at that video.
I'm thankful that God made it capable for me to go to APU, just for this church and for this church family.
I am thankful for my whole family now as a Christian family, because before it used to be just me, and now it's my whole family, and it definitely made us a closer family.
I'm thankful for our new ministry leader in children's kids crew, Mandy. I'm thankful for Lillian and all the other volunteer teachers and helpers. Thankful that the ministry seems to be growing, and the kids seem to be enjoying the new program we have going.
I'm thankful for our family and friends. And what are we thankful for? No, baby Jesus. And baby Jesus.
One thing I'm just truly thankful for is just being able to see just the building and us coming, and God's promise to us coming to fruition. And we waited so long just to be able to have one spot to meet, and just seeing that God had a plan for us. And even though we were 3 years, I think 3 years it took, but just to see his tangible work was pretty awesome and spectacular for me.
What I'm grateful for the past year is all that God has been doing in Kids Crew, which has been really amazing. Starting from the mural painting, all the way to what happens in the classrooms, and all the servants that we have, and how invested they are into the lives of the children and into their families.
I am thankful for God being there. For the past year was kind of tough. I was kind of suicidal, going through a divorce, but God was always there, and he made me into the stronger person that I think I am today. So if you guys are going through trials and stuff, just trust God, you know. He'll be there for you, and he'll make you into a stronger person. And I just want to thank God for being there always for me.
One thing I'm thankful for is just God's empowerment over this past year. There's been a lot of situations that have come up, and I've had to ask the Lord Jesus just for his wisdom and empowerment. He's always so faithful, and it's really true that he is the wonderful counselor. And I'm the most grateful for his faithfulness to myself and to his people.
That last lady was very intelligent. I think she comes from a very strong family with a very handsome brother. So that was my sister Darlene sharing there. And that one little kid, he was saying he was very thankful for Minions. He was very, very thankful for Minions. Hey, we're all thankful for different things. Cute little guy. But, you know, what I wanted to kind of pull apart there is, you know, a few of the people that shared in there. You know, McKenna, one of our high school students here, you know, she was sharing that she's thankful that this year is the year that, you know, her family is all coming to church together as a unit, you know, and how God brought about that change this year. It's not just her, but it's her family being able to come together. Albert shared there, and he was the gentleman who shared that, you know, it was kind of a tough year in the fact that, you know, he went through a split up in relationships, and it brought even to him to a place of just suicidal thoughts and struggles in that way. And I know that's something that we prayed with Albert this past year. And I think what you can see through these people is that through the changes God brought was just a sense of faithfulness, of faith in Christ, that he was going to see them through it, that he was going to see them through these changes. And even what Darlene shared at the end is that God is so faithful. He's so faithful through the tough times in our lives, through the changes that God brings about. And there's one set of scriptures I just want to share with you, that story I think that very much brings home the point of being faithful, of what that looks like, even at times where the change that God brings into our life goes against everything that we believe. It goes against every sense of common sense, everything about us when God brings these changes to us, and we want to fight against it so much, but how we're to be faithful. And That's through the story of Jesus calling Simon Peter to be one of his disciples. This is one of my favorite stories, and I had a chance to go through it in a study not too long ago. And there was just some things that were pointed out, I think, that you see actually the level of faithfulness that God is calling Peter to have. And as we pick up this story, Jesus is teaching. He's this famous rabbi, and wherever he goes, there's just tons and hordes of people that want to hear his teachings. And so as he's teaching, he's up against the shore, and people are starting to crowd him, and people are starting to come up to him. And so to get some space and to continue to teach, he jumps up aboard a boat. He jumps aboard this boat so that they can take off a little distance from the shore, and so that he can continue to preach to the people, but with safety in mind, that he wouldn't be crowded up against. And so his disciples load him onto this boat. But knowing Jesus, he's very intentional about the boat that he gets on, and this is the boat of Simon Peter. And Peter is a fisherman by trade. This is what he does. This is how he makes a living. And Peter's coming off a night where he and his men have gone out to fish, and they haven't caught anything. They haven't caught anything at all. And so they're probably pretty disgruntled. They're probably kind of down that a whole night was spent and they weren't able to come up with any type of catch for the evening. And so we're going to pick up the story there in Luke chapter 5, verse 4, and we're going to see kind of what God is asking of Peter as he gives him a command. And this is what it says. It says, when he had finished speaking, and when the he they're talking about is Jesus, when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." And we may think, reading this as I've read it many, many times, like, okay, he's just, Peter's a fisherman. He's telling him, hey, go out into the water, drop the nets. No big deal, right? He's not asking him to do anything that he doesn't know how to do. But if you kind of think about this story a little differently, Peter is this fisherman, and he comes from a long line of fishermen. This is his family trade. His family has learned to fish, and they brought this to him, and this is what he does for a living. He knows how to do it. He knows when to do it. And so to have someone come up to him, even if he was a rabbi, this famous teacher in Jesus, to tell him to cast this net out, would be something that would be kind of hard to take this direction from, because Jesus is a rabbi, and his family trade is carpentry. He works with wood. What does he know about fishing? So not knowing this guy, telling him to do this, and two big things kind of come into play here. One is that these fishermen at this time, they never fished during the day because they would catch nothing. They fished at night. And when they would head out, they would cast the nets out. And why would he fish in the same area that he came up dry in the night before? It was just kind of went against common sense. It went against Peter's intuition. And the thought was that as at nighttime, the fish would come closer to the shore so they could cast the nets and bring the fish up. And it would be much easier to cast the nets in shallow water than having to go further out into the water where they'd cast the nets out during the day, and it'd be much harder to bring the nets up and bring the fish in. So Peter knew exactly how to do this. And yet what Jesus was asking him to do, even a simple task like this of casting out the nets, went against Peter's intuition. It went against what he was trained to do, what he knew in his soul, as he'd been doing this for year after year after year. And yet he did it. He casted the nets out. And maybe he did it for a couple different reasons. Maybe one, he did it because he's like, hey, dude, this guy Jesus, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I'm going to cast this net out. I'm going to bring it up, and fancy guy's going to look dumb when I come up and there's no fish in here because I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to let this guy carry through with it. We'll see if it happens. But, I'm just being obedient. Maybe that was his attitude. Maybe his attitude was, you know what, I respect Jesus. I know he's this famous rabbi, so you know what, I'm just going to do it. I don't think it's going to work, but you know what, I'll do it. What's the worst that can happen? Or maybe his attitude was one of genuine faith, where he's like, you know what, I believe in this person. I believe this guy and what he's teaching. So I believe that if he tells me to cast the net out, something is going to happen. But no matter what his reasoning was, he decided to do it. And let's see what turned out here, what happened. In verse 6, we'll pick up. It says, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Just a crazy story. When you break it down, you look into it a little bit deeper. And the reason I say this is because, You know, for Peter, it wasn't just casting the net out. It was also the realization that when he did and he brought this fish in, he realized who Jesus was. He realized this was the Son of God. And it wasn't just him bringing a fish. It was him coming to the realization that, you know what? This guy's calling me to something different. He's going to bring about a change in my life that is going to change me in ways that I can't even imagine. And Jesus did. He said, don't be afraid. Come and follow me. Come and be a fisher of men. And it says that Peter left all that he had. He left his family. He left his trade to follow this person, not knowing what that was going to look like, not knowing what his life was going to change and look into. And the reason I share this with you guys is because I'm pretty much guaranteed there'll be a time in your life, maybe it's happened already or maybe it's going to come this year, where if you really call your guys a follower of Christ, a true disciple of Christ, that Jesus is going to ask you to take part in a change in your life that is going to blow your life away, that's going to shatter your life, just like it did for Peter. And he may ask you to do something, he may bring change into your life that goes against every bit of common sense you have, that goes against everything that you've learned, everything you're comfortable with, every kind of intuition and training you have, but he's going to ask you to do it and to be faithful, just like he did for Peter. Just like he's done for maybe many of you. And it won't make sense. If you try to reason it out and you try to figure it out and you try to manipulate it, this change, it's not gonna have the desired effect. It's not gonna be what God has planned for you. And that's because if you think about faith, faith is acting in advance of what you're only gonna understand in reverse. It's taking a leap of faith and not knowing what the outcome's gonna be, but trusting in God's provision in the future with something that maybe you won't understand right now, but maybe in the future God will help you to understand why that change came, even if it's a painful, hurtful change in your lives. You know, and that's just my final point for you guys. I don't know if I share this, is that through the times of change, the difficult changes, focus on your faith when change comes. Focus on your faith when change comes, because that's going to be what sustains you. You know, I'm just going to close with this, guys. You know, for many of us, as we look back at the year, you know, there's tons to be thankful for from 2013. A lot of things, good things that happened here at our church, maybe good things that happened in your lives. And for me, you know, 2013 held a lot of positive things as well. But, you know, in all honesty, 2013 was a very rough year for me in a lot of ways. You know, there were people in my life that God removed, that were there at the beginning of this year, that God took out of my life. Friends that I had that he brought to different cities or different churches, but people that were very important to me. And God, for just in his divine will, he removed them. And in a lot of ways, those losses of those relationships and those friendships really dictated a lot of how I viewed this year. You know, there were times, you know, I'd wake up each morning and there was just this sense of loss, you know, that I couldn't shake. It would always be in the back of my mind, you know, of just a deep sense of loss. And there'd be things that would happen in my life where I could be thankful for, and I knew the blessings were there, but there was just a hollowness inside, you know, to everything I did. You know, it was hard to find joy, even in the blessings that God brought my way. It was like there was a hole there, and there was nothing that could fill it. And it was this sense that, you know, no matter what I was doing, you know, this cloud of loss, of change was just over my head. And it really dictated for me a lot of how I approached this year and how I looked at this year. You know, it was such a time of struggle, and I tried to get through it in God. And I think the thing is that, you know, we can come up here as pastors and we can teach and we can share things, and you know these truths like, hey, you know, don't manipulate the change. You know, be grateful for what God's doing in your lives. You know, have faith. And they're easy things to say, and you know they're true. But until you have that sense of loss in your heart and despair that you go through each day for someone that you miss, someone that you want to see, and the relationship has changed, you know what? Those are all just words until you have to put them into action in your life, until you have to live on those truths that God's given you. And I know there was a reason God brought these changes about. I knew they were. I knew they were there for a reason. And the only time I would actually feel like normal or content was when I would get down on my knees and pray to God. You know, when I would open up his word and read it. The rest of the time I just had this uneasiness to me. And it was these times I would just more and more go back to God and just get in his word and just pray to him. And that was the times that I would feel content. I'd feel a sense of peace. And I began to do that more and more. And as I began to do that more and more, God began to reveal to me why he brought about these changes in the first place. It was to look at my life and say, Dave, do you find your contentment? Do you find your identity in these relationships? Even though I've taken them away, is that where your happiness comes from? From being with these people, from having them care about you. I know it's important to you because I gave it to you, but I'm taking it away for a reason because I want you to find your contentment, your identity, your satisfaction in me. What I think about you matters, not what these other people think about you. Your identity comes through me. I love you. I will be there with you every step of the way. And that's what he wanted to show me. That's what he wanted me to live, that his viewpoint of me took precedence over anybody else. And you know what? I want to say that, hey, when I realized that, hey, everything was fine and it was a great, happy year, still, no, it wasn't. You know what? That was still a daily process. Maybe like for many of you guys, that's a daily process. Each day you have to wake up and you have to pray that to God and you have to remember those truths. And that's the thought of taking up your cross daily. It's a daily grind. You take up that cross daily and you follow God and you trust in those truths and you remind yourself of those truths. And that's the change that God is bringing about. Even in this year too, amongst those, it was just, the news again that my mom, she's been battling cancer, that her cancer was becoming stronger, and she was going to have to go back on chemotherapy. And that was another thing that was a struggle to have to deal with this year. But I know many of you guys have had maybe some of the same struggles, just in a different fashion. And the thing I just want to leave you guys is with this, there is a God that is so faithful. And as you go through these changes, he will be there with you. There is something he's trying to show you through it. And, I'm not trying to look back at the year and tell you, hey, everything was great and everything was dandy, because I know for many of you, and myself included, those changes really just twisted your heart and they twisted your life, and that's what you're going to remember from 2013. But the thing that we can also remember is that as God provides change in our life, some for the good and some for the bad, is that our faith is going to be what sustains us, that God will never change, and his love for us will never change, and that's what we can find faith in. I can guarantee you guys, 2014 is going to bring change in your lives. It will, I guarantee you. Maybe some things you embrace and some things you're so thankful for, but maybe some things that change your life and flip it upside down, and that are a struggle each day to get through. But I would pray, guys, that you would find that your faith in God would be what would sustain you through those changes this coming year. As unpredictable as the year is, the one thing that we can bank on, the one thing that we can put our hope and trust in, is that God will be there, and these changes are for our good, and that he will never, ever leave us. And I hope that's the promise that you guys would take with you as you head into 2014. Let me close in a word of prayer. Father, I'm always thankful that we can kind of take a step back this year, Lord, and really look at it. I know it's so easy for us many times to just steamroll into the new year, and we go into it with optimism and just of what the new year is going to hold. But I really think that there are times you want us to just sit and think about what you're doing in our lives, Lord. And I pray for each of us here in this room, as we look back at 2013, that we would take an account of what you were doing, Father, in the good and the bad. Lord, that we can realize that through those things, Lord, you were moving. You were moving. I ask, Father, that we could embrace the changes that you bring our way, Lord. That we would be thankful for the things you provided for us. That we would always realize that our faith is what's going to sustain us through these tough times, Lord. I pray for each person in this room. I pray, Father, for just a blessed 2014, Lord. We're so thankful to have the church family that we do, Lord. I pray that you would continue to bless them and to bring things into their lives that they are grateful for. But I pray also amidst the changes, and especially the difficult ones, Father, that they would see you through those changes, that they would see what you're doing and why you're doing it, even if they don't understand it, Lord, that they would embrace it because they would know at the end of it is going to become a place where we are deeper and more in love and more reliant on you, Father. Heal our broken hearts, Father. Heal the struggles that we have. We trust in you, Father, that you will be here to sustain us, and we look forward to seeing what you have in store for South Bay Community Church in 2014 and for each one of us. We love you, Lord, and we praise you, and we pray all these things in your name. Amen.